guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing a topic video on top 10 best comic book runs in my opinion. So, let's get started. The person who recommended this was GreenArrowHunter. If you want to go check out their channel, in the description below there is a link. Guys, if you have any recommendations for future topic videos, please let me know in the comments below. If I answer them, that means in a couple of weeks it'll either be on Comic Uno or Comic Frontline. Usually for Comic Uno, I have them every Friday with my comic book reviews, and for Comic Frontline, I have them every Sunday or Monday. But let's get started with this list, which actually was originally a top 5 list that they recommended, but top 5 was hard. So I'm like, alright, let's do at least 10 titles. So that is what I'm doing here. So we're going 10 to 1, so let's get started. Number 10 is Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis. So I'm talking about the original Ultimate Spider-Man, which lasted actually a lot of issues, over 100. So, and then even I would count the Miles Morales stuff too, because that's a great continuation to the Peter Parker Ultimate Spider-Man. But this was such a good and important story to Spider-Man and Marvel, because it opened up doors to do more Elseworld stories in a continuous basis, not just a what if, oh, here's one issue, what if story. It kind of opened the doors to that. Obviously opened the doors to a very popular universe, which was the Ultimate Universe, and we got to see a lot of interesting new versions of our characters, but also it gave a modern spin on Peter Parker. We got to see Peter Parker back in high school, which in the 616 universe, he grew out of that. We wanted to see him as an adult, so here we had the opportunity to show a modern version of Peter Parker in high school, and I really enjoyed that aspect. But what also was so good about this series was not just Peter Parker, it was his supporting cast. They made Gwen Stacy important, MJ, Kong, you know, the list kind of goes on of how many great supporting characters. Liz Allen, who's one of my favorites from the Ultimate Universe. So many great stories, but also a nice twist on some characters we know and love. Like, going into Liz Allen's story, we had Liz Allen, who was a mutant, you know? She was just like kind of a best friend type character in the regular books, and now we're seeing her in a little bit of an evil side in the current Spider-Man books. But it was cool to see that, you know, a familiar face going through becoming a mutant, and being the daughter of the Blob. Like, there's so many nice twists there. So Ultimate Spider-Man is my number 10 pick. Number 9 is Peter David's Supergirl. So this was really hard. I love a lot of Supergirl runs. I've been reading Supergirl for a very long time. You know, that was definitely one of the titles that first got me into DC, was Supergirl, or at least one of the first characters. And Peter David's Supergirl I loved because it was darker, you know, had all these different religious undertones, which was really interesting. And even though it wasn't Kara Zor-El, Linda Danvers was just such an interesting character. Again, she had this darker side to her, but then she became kind of a lighter, heroic character through Supergirl, becoming Supergirl. So it was a nice twist on Supergirl when she wasn't around, because this was between her death and her revival. Alright, moving on to number 8, which is Runaways Volume 1. So I'm talking about the whole Mole story arc and kind of coming to be the Runaways. And even though there's a ton of other volumes of Runaways I enjoy, I had to go with the original Runaways. This was such a great story. When I first read this, I was blown away. I'm like, this is such a cool concept. I loved every single character that was introduced, and I remember just being so addicted reading it. And I read it off Marvel Unlimited, so this was a long time ago, and I read it off there, and every day when I came home from school, I'm like, alright, gotta read the next issue of Runaways. So I was very addicted to it, and I still love the characters, and it's a shame that we don't really get to see the characters that often in the Marvel Universe, but hopefully that will change with the TV show. Alright, moving on to number 7, which is the only New 52 title on here, but it's a title I really love, and that is Gail Simone's Batgirl. I know that's maybe a more controversial one, because not everyone loved that she became Batgirl again, but I loved how Gail Simone dealt with Barbara's trauma after the Killing Joke, and I always liked Barbara Gordon Moore's Batgirl, and that doesn't take anything away from her being Oracle, but I've always enjoyed her as Batgirl. So I liked how Gail Simone brought her as Batgirl, but didn't forget who she was with Oracle and why that was important that she was Oracle. And So I enjoyed that. And I also really like Gail Simone's narrative of the Gordon family, which I feel like comics, and especially Barbara's stories, should focus on more, is that relationship. And I'm sad that we haven't really seen that since the Gail Simone run. Alright, so moving on to number 6, which is American Vampire. Now there's been, I believe, 3 cycles now, and we're getting to the 4th one soon-ish. But I'm talking about the original American Vampire. Now, this is a book I actually read way after it was out, and I heard a lot of good things, and I just never had the opportunity to pick it up. So I finally picked it up in trade, and I was so addicted to this series, and it's one of those series that I go back to and read a lot, especially Pearl's storyline. Now, there's other characters that are involved in the book, which is kind of interesting, but especially Pearl and how she grew from the 1920s to all the way to the 1960s up to this point. And that's cool to kind of see that character development, but also utilizing this idea of being a vampire and seeing the history of America in that point of view. So, some really interesting characters, an awesome concept, and I still, to this day, believe this is Scott Snyder's best work. Alright, moving on to number 5. Now, this is another really important book to me, and it's a miniseries, actually, and that is Kitty Pryde and Wolverine from the 1980s, I believe it was out. And this was such an important book to me, and I reread this probably at least once a year, and I've been reading it since I was small, since I got into Kitty Pryde, which was a really long time ago. And I love this story because it was Kitty Pryde kind of finding her identity, and also it's this really interesting inner turmoil for Kitty Pryde, because she's literally controlled by this demon, Ogun, who's connected to Wolverine, and this creates the Kitty Pryde Wolverine father-daughter relationship we know. And also Kitty kind of becomes a ninja in this book, and they continue that story for the most part in the Marvel Universe. Sometimes they don't really mention it, but when they do, I get really happy because I love this storyline. But yeah, this is Kitty finally figuring out her identity, which was Shadowcat at the time, which is the identity that most people know Kitty Pryde as, because all her other names kind of sucked. And she's like, alright, this is my official name now, Shadowcat, kind of showing that she's growing up and she knows that she's, she went through this dark period, but it still brought her to still be the light character we know, but she's gone through stuff now. And yeah, I love this book. I loved Ogun as a villain, and it was just such a good self-identity storyline for Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. Alright, so moving on to number 4, which is also a more recent book that I've read, but I was so addicted to and I reread all the time, and that is Revival. So Revival actually just recently ended, so that is why it's on the list. I try putting all books that have ended because it's a run. So Revival was such a good book for me. I loved, obviously, the family aspect of the book, but it was a good mystery of a whodunit, who killed M, but it was more than that. There was these religious undertones of the idea of life and death that everyone, goes through. And I really like that. I love those themes, but of course the characters were the most interesting aspect of the series, especially Dana, who was the actual main character, and M, who was the catalyst character of the series. So moving on to number 3, again, these are just such hard, because this is such a hard list, because I love all these series, but number 3 is Young Avengers Volume 1, which I guess I'll count, like, Children's Crusade and all that, because I feel like that's kind of the same run. It's the same creative team, it's just technically different volumes, but it's all the same stuff. So it's the Family Matters one, it was the first volume, and Children's Crusade. All pretty much the same story. And it's these kids who are somewhat related to the Avengers. You have like Cassie Lang, you have Kate Bishop, who was never related to the Avengers, but she saw the Avengers and she's like, hey, I saved the day from my sister's wedding. I'm gonna join you guys. And she just becomes leader just like that because she's Kate Bishop. And so we get to see Wiccan, Hulking, all these awesome Patriot, all these awesome characters we know today that, are more popular now. But I love this story because the team dynamic was so good, and it was just these kids who wanted to become Avengers, but the Avengers are like, no, you can't be the Avengers, you're too young, and they are like, no, we're gonna become the Avengers, and they kind of create their own team because of it, and their dynamic is so good. This is a book I reread all the time, because some of the, you know, a lot of these characters became my favorites over time. Cassie Lang, love her story, as you guys know. Kate Bishop, since that day, I've loved Kate Bishop's character. I'm so glad since Matt Fraction's run, she's gotten a little bit more spotlight, and she's become more of this popular character in the mainstream. So yes, this is a very important series, and I always recommend anyone who's trying to get into comics, read Young Avengers. It's such a good book, and it's so rereadable, and there's such great characters, and even Jessica Jones is in it. So very mainstream, reachable. It's reachable for the mainstream. Alright, so moving on to number 2, which is Stephanie Brown's Batgirl by Brian Q. Miller. Now, this is another very important book for me. I am a huge Stephanie Brown fan. I have been even before she was Batgirl. I loved her as Spoiler, loved the Tim Drake Robin series. That probably would have been close on my, best runs ever, too, because that's a great run. But this was just always an important series to me. I love Stephanie. I love her character because and I also love the Bat Family. I've always liked the Bat Family a lot since I was a kid. That is a franchise that, helped me get into DC because I was always more of a Marvel fan. So it was like the Bat Family, Supergirl, Teen Titans. But yeah, I found Stephanie, and what I loved about her character is that, everyone in the Bat Family, that even if they're kind of the light of hope, you have Dick Grayson, who always believed in going into the future and not looking at the past, he still has trauma. Same for Barbara, same for all the characters of the Bat Family. But Stephanie, she has trauma in a way because her father, well actually, she's definitely gone through a lot, but her father was a villain. She's definitely had trauma and things she has to go through, but she was always positive. She was always the hope of the Bat Family. She always persevered. No one ever really wanted her to be a superhero. They were like, no, you can't do this. What are you doing? Why are you Spoiler? No one wanted her to be Spoiler. No one wanted her to be Batgirl. But no matter what, she never gave up. And I love that about her character. And with Batgirl, it was just such a nice view of seeing the Stephanie we knew as Spoiler and them redeeming her character after they killed her off pretty much to make Tim Drake Robin again. They brought back Stephanie, put her into the Batgirl mantle, and she grew as Batgirl with the help of Barbara Gordon, which was obviously a great supporting character in that series. And yeah, and we got to see her grow as Batgirl, but also you had this college element, which was kind of different at the time, that you didn't really see a lot of characters in college, or at least actually have a book kind of based around them being in college. So I like that we're seeing Stephanie grow up a bit. It was just such a good book, and if you like the Bat Family at all, it's such an important book to read, or Stephanie Brown, of course, where you can see why I'm not as positive about her return in DC Rebirth if you read that journey with Batgirl / Stephanie Brown. Alright, moving on to number 1, which is pretty obvious if you know me, and that is, of course, Spider-Girl. Now, I couldn't just pick I couldn't pick one volume of Spider-Girl because they're all pretty much connected. They're all the same creative team for the most part. It's Tom DeFalco writing every issue. Ron Frenz has been there pretty much from the beginning. Pat O'Leaf did the artwork for the first 30 issues of Spider-Girl, and then Ron Frenz took over. So it's always been pretty much the same creative team into regular Spider-Girl, Amazing Spider-Girl, Spectacular Spider-Girl, the mini-series she had. So I count it all as the same thing, the same run. And if I had to pick a volume, it probably would be The Amazing Spider-Girl. I think it's, when I try to recommend Spider-Girl to people, it's a bit more modern than the original Spider-Girl, which came out early 2000s. So that's the only reason I would say, alright, The Amazing Spider-Girl. Also, the artwork is probably stronger in Amazing Spider-Girl too, just because of the quality of the paper and the quality of the coloring for that book. But yeah, this is a book that's really important to me, as you guys know. Spider-Girl will 100% always be my favorite character. In some ways, I think this run has inspired me to write and, inspired me to want to come up with stories. So it's a very important character to me. And I mean, I love this story. If you're a Spider-Man fan, there's all that goodness and nostalgia for Spider-Man, but with a twist. And it's not Mayday being, you know, Spider-Man. She's not. She's very much her own character, because she's also a character that actually never dealt with trauma. She didn't become a superhero because someone died. She just became one because she grew up with Mary Jane and Peter being her parents, and she knew that was her responsibility. So I love the family dynamic. The supporting characters are so good in the high school and in the superhero community for Mayday. But also I like that Mayday was just individual superhero, you know? Even though sometimes she would team up with people, she would usually just hang out with herself, which is usually what Spider-Man would do too, is that he liked doing his solo adventures a bit more. So I enjoyed that. But I also like about Spider-Girl is that she wasn't perfect by any means. You know, I wouldn't call Spider-Girl the strongest superhero in the world, but she always persevered. Even though she knew she wasn't the strongest superhero in the world, she didn't care. She would go fight up against a godlike monster just because she knows that's what she had to do. So, I mean, there's so many great stories. I could go on and on about why I love Spider-Girl. But, yeah, so that is my #1 run. Pick it up if you never have. And though that is my top 10 of, you know, my favorite comic book runs, please let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite comic book runs? What do they mean to you? So this is Comic Uno. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. Also, description below, there are links for my comic book, Like Father, Like Daughter. And don't forget to like the Facebook page of Like Father, Like Daughter. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.